Hey everyone, it's Adam Farkas. Welcome to another ODwire webinar. Thanks for coming out tonight. All housekeeping aside, let's turn our attention to the topic at hand tonight, which is demystifying in-house lens finishing. And this topic is an oldie but a goodie for ODwire. So when we first started ODwire about 20 years ago, when we had an influx of young folks coming in who were just starting out in practice, the question always was, what's the most profitable thing I can install? Like if I can only buy one thing right now, one instrument, what should I do? And in the beginning, it was always get yourself an edger. It was like the standard answer, get yourself an edger. It's going to make you the most money the most quickly. It'll pay for itself almost immediately. And over time, over the past 20 years, obviously practice has become more high tech and there are other instruments that people are buying. But I think we've come full circle because this has become a hot topic again, especially because with improved technology, and finishing has become even easier to do in office. But I know that a lot of people have a lot of questions about it. So tonight is all about how to actually implement this in your office, sort of the nuts and bolts of it. And we have a great speaker for you tonight who's going to show us how it's all done. So Dr. Chris May is a graduate of the Southern College of Optometry. He completed a residency in ocular disease and his fellowship with the American Academy of Optometry. He served as the center director for the West Tennessee Eye Care, and he was the team eye care provider for both the Memphis Grizzlies and the St. Louis Cardinals AAA affiliate Memphis Redbirds. So if you're a baseball fan, that's pretty cool. And now he has a group private practice with 3 offices in North Mississippi. And one little piece of trivia about Chris that we just learned as we were talking before this, he is a master barbecuer and actually competes in world championship barbecue events. So I thought that was pretty cool too. Has nothing to do with finishing, but pretty neat anyway. And I think one of the most important things though about Chris is that he's in the trenches just like you. He uses these products every day and he implements them in his practice. So he's going to step you through how it all works and even the economics of it. So with all that said, why don't I turn control over to Chris?
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And by the way, that intro was pretty much everything that we needed to say. We're done. He did a fantastic job on it. I think the oldie but a goodie concept is absolutely perfect for this concept. And as we're talking about things, I'm going to grab this here and advance. So we will talk a lot about why in-house lens finishing is hot again. I'd probably argue it never actually cooled off. It just is one of those things that we got so busy we stopped paying attention to. But setting up and getting started for a lot of us, it is the trouble, and it's just like anything else. It's like working out. You can join the gym, but until you actually start, forming your habits and changing what you're doing, you're not there. And just like the gym, when you do it, it's better for you in the long run. It can really change our profits and do what we need to do. But we'll talk a lot about how these edging systems have changed and like how a system like the Briot Couture is pretty amazing, and it has changed this process. Like you said, we're 3 offices, 5 docs. We've actually always had a finishing lab, interestingly enough, since 1978. My bio is probably the best example of the answer to this question. Where are you the most comfortable? Is it in disease? Is it in treatment? Is it in medications? Is it in pharm? Or is it in optical finishing? And I would say that, when I was in optometry school, we were really focusing, that shift was starting to happen. We still had a lot of optics, but we were starting to move over into lots and lots of disease focus. And this has completely shifted in the last 20 years. And hard to believe that I've been out of school for more than 20 years. It goes quick. But before optometry school, I was a lab guy. First of all, I had hair, I had a ponytail. I was like the guy that worked, my optometrist, actually his wife was my kindergarten teacher. And I worked in his lab making glasses in the afternoons after I got finished with class in college. And it was really cool. I didn't really fully understand everything I was doing when I first started out. The equipment was very hard to use. My training took forever at the beginning to get me onboarded and to stop making dumb mistakes. And it was this really big process. Well, then when I got to school, my education was still really optically centered. Of course, it also helped that my business partner and mentor taught ophthalmic optics at SCO. So then we've always had a very optics-centric office. It was one of those things that we really have always leaned into. And I'm still at SCO. I'm faculty there in Ocular Disease Clinic, and I'm adjunct faculty. We have students training in the office. And let me tell you, our current students are incredibly well trained. They're amazing, and they are far more interested and far more comfortable doing a YAG or SLT, interpreting OCTs, adapting to using headset visual field technology. You can hand them a new piece of equipment, they figure it out and integrate it into their workflow instantly. And they're way more comfortable with that than anything in an optical lab. So what I think is really interesting about that is that in-house optical finishing might be the key answer, not just an answer, but the key answer to many of the challenges we face that we sit here complaining about. It's so hard to stay profitable in private practice. I'm trying to differentiate myself from other offices, from online options, from other, chains, from these other things. I'm trying to find a unique way to be able to provide really high level customer service. I think it's kind of sitting there, Adam, to your point, waiting to kind of be the cool thing again. And Dr. Schoen, who I originally worked with, who taught ophthalmic optics, he used to say, you got to dance with the one that brung you. And honestly, what brought us to this dance in optometry and in eye care in general, we started out as jewelers, helping people see is what got us there. It doesn't mean that the other's not important. It just means that it's a place we've got to kind of reinvigorate ourselves. So, yes, profit's important. Okay, doesn't do any good. Profit's more than just a number. It doesn't do any good to be as busy as you could possibly be, working yourself to death, like a lot of us are, and honestly, not being profitable. On the other side, being, quote unquote, profitable per customer with no customers means you're still out of business. So we've got to find this differentiation point, this way to control our costs, to increase profits, to make ourselves stand out, to do a great job, and then offer something really novel like same day or next day glasses. And one thing is really interesting for all that technology. I mean, you know how complicated an OCT is? It's ridiculous. And patients still consider like same day, next day glasses as super advanced. And I think for a lot of years, I think we kind of fell away from it and we kind of forgot about it. But it's interesting. Patients will still say, they'll say the old line. It was an old ad, and they say, "Can I get my glasses in about an hour?" And you hear it, it's like, wow, it's in there. It's stuck in. It made it into the zeitgeist of society. And somehow we've kind of let it slide down our priority list. So that's what we want to talk about tonight, kind of bumping it back up our priority list. And let's demystify this decision process, see how it fits, and talk about what it can do for us. So let's look at the steps in this process. Okay, so you want to be a in-house finishing god, and you're going to be fantastic at this. We're going to own this whole thing. Well, let's assume for the first of all, you're not just updating equipment. I had a conversation actually with the doc a few weeks ago that was looking to update equipment, and the equipment has changed a ton. But you already understand the ROI and what's there. It's the technology that's the shift. When you're not started, it's the equivalent of that workout analogy again. Adding another rep of something different into your workouts not that hard to do. Starting working out, that's the tricky part. So here's our list. How are we starting? And when I first got this list, it's actually one of the things we'd ask Oceanics, hey, show me what does this look like? And they gave me a list, and they said, well, you got to do your research. You're going to hire an optician. You're going to purchase a piece of equipment. You got to train the optician, train the staff, and then you got to break up with your outsourced lab. It's like, okay, yeah, that is a very thorough checklist. That's also a super intimidating checklist. You are busy, seeing lots of patients, arguing with staff, trying to keep staff on board, arguing with your EHR, trying to keep the internet up, all of the things that happen in life. This is intimidating, but it's also why most of us fail to even start, because we're too busy to get past step one. Well, I got really good news for you. You're here. We handled step one, research check. So now we're on to step two. Now, what's also cool is step two's not what it used to be. So you don't have to hire an advanced optician anymore to do this. The equipment advances have completely revolutionized who we need. Thank goodness, because hiring's harder than it's ever been, right? And we feel that's there. But the concept of it being an optician is yes, for advanced jobs and for using equipment to its fullest potential there. But this equipment is approachable by numerous numbers of your staff, right? So it's not one of those things where only one staff member can touch it, and if anybody else gets near it, it bites them. It's like, hey, we've got work to do. We have patients to take care of. If it's a busy Saturday, you have more than one person that can work, even if your quote unquote optician is off. So I don't think we have to hire an optician. I think we have to train the right people that's there. Now, I did try to see if we could find a way to skip step 3, but you do still have to purchase a piece of equipment. But what comes with that also helps us, because training that optician and the staff kind of drops down off our list, right? Because of the step 2 process, since it's easier, we can train who we have, or that acquisition doesn't have to be someone who's already a master of edgers and optics. But the support and the training systems that Visiomics makes available with this means that step 4 is done for you. You're kind of doing that with step 3. And then there's always breaking up with your outsourced lab. And I think that's one of the, breaking up's hard to do. That's another oldie but a goodie there. But it's the good news is you don't have to do this either. All right. Your partnership with your lab, by definition, is going to change. Yes. Okay. So if your rep is your best friend, then yep, I understand. If your lab is wonderful and they never make errors, that's fantastic. At the same time, if your rep always laughs at your jokes and they're your best friend, are they your best friend, or is that you do a lot of business with them and they're paying a lot of bills? So our relationship with them is going to change in a good way. It's going to lower our bills. But your lab's still a part of your practice. They're going to be able to provide you information that you need. You're still working with them as a source of buying wholesale lenses and buying finished lenses that you're going to complete. So one great term that was used, and I love this, like, keep your lab honest. So as you're doing the research and we're talking about numbers, remember that your lab's job is to finish lenses and sell them to you. So what do you guys think about me, putting in an in-house finishing lab? I don't do that. So make sure that your advisors are the ones that are providing you with good information. Okay. So as we're looking at this, where to start suddenly got pretty easy. This is manageable. This is something we can do. Now we still have a little bit more to do. So let's start getting going and be choiceful in how we begin. So, and I'm going to leave this up there. I hate being the guy that reads slides, but this is kind of a walkthrough mentally, because it's as much an exercise as anything else. So think about your office, right? We just finished a major remodel, and I tell you what, it's amazing how much things have changed. We went from having big spaces set aside for field equipment to going, I don't need that anymore. My workflow's changed. The space planning is the same way. This idea that you need to have this huge soundproof room that has this crazy stuff all in it, that's gone now. It doesn't have to be all of those things. When you're envisioning manufacturing, that's not what we're doing. Our footprint is really shrunk down. And the consolidation of the technology within the technology is absolutely astonishing within the edger in the system, particularly the Couture system. The lensometer, the blocker, the tracer, the edger, the finishing wheel, the drill. I mean, it's all already there. So it's absolutely amazing. Now, yes, you are going to have enough space to put that up, and you need some space for lens storage. If you're going to stock some lenses, you're going to have a tint and coating unit so that you can do some sun work. So you're going to have some counter space. You have to have room to work and trays and some things like that. But the idea of having to do a build out is really non-existent at this point. All we're really trying to do is to plan some space and dedicate it. And I would say, if I was just shooting from the hip, if you have a 10 by 10 space, what would be honestly a very small office, or even half of a room, you could probably have all the space you need to be able to add in-office finishing into your office. What's amazing now, though, is, well, what about the power? What about the water? Well, yep, water and power are needed, but it's not like you're pulling 3-phase 440 volt crazy stuff. It's a plug, right? So it's not using anything that's going to be out of spec. So you're not going to have to pull a ton of circuits and do a bunch of other things. Sound is a consideration. This isn't something you want to just sit up front, but it is so much more quiet than it used to be in the past. And this brushless motor technology, in the way that it's changed, it truly amazing. When we got our new edger and they fire it up and you're going, really? That's amazing. I mean, and we've seen this in other places, right? Like what's the sound of a Tesla kind of pulling up on you? You know, it's so quiet compared to your grandfather's skill saw when he hit the power. That is completely different tech in the way that it does it. So it's much quieter, a lot less power utilization, really pretty elegant in the way the equipment has consolidated everything into one. And you want to think through all of the other implications here, right? So, you know, what about tax law, ADA? What's your workflow going to look like? Where are you storing things? You know, what's going to work well for the rest of your staff? Don't just drop everything out in the middle of everything. But in our office, we kind of took this in a different direction, and it's not fully realized yet. We're almost there, but we kind of took this concept and returned it and went kind of plus it. I'm a Disney guy, and I love their concept of plus it. You know, because you're doing something. Okay, well, I'm doing it. What can I do that would take it further than they think I'm going to take it, and maybe even up to that wow level? And so, or it's either that, or maybe my wife has made me watch way too much Chip and Joanna. But um, think of like Pimp My Ride or Cribs meets Extreme Makeover Optical Lab Edition, right? So we're going to make our lab this thing that used to be stuck out the way back furthest part of the office in the dark where nobody went in, and instead turn it into something that can show our patients what we're capable of, that can show them, first of all, how amazing the technology is and what the footprint looks like, but also showing them like, hey, this is where your glasses are made. It's how it's made taken to 1,000, and it really makes it so much more real for them, and understanding that this is something that we can do, and not just can do, we're showing them all of the things that we're capable of and all of this equipment that we'd invested in for them. So let's talk a little bit about the equipment. So when it comes to the Briot and Weco equipment, Visionics is kind of brought in under their umbrella. Wavefront lens finishing is game-changing technology. So the amount of precision that we're talking about in scanning, you know, back from when I was in school and we were actually cutting out, you had to go cut your pattern. My patterns were always terrible, you know, and although the people that were really good at it could do it in one cut, and they pull out a pocket knife and whittle a couple things, pop it onto the old AIT and crank that thing up, and it spit out a lens, and they did one retouch and they were done. And I was there 6 hours later still trying to figure out how am I going to get this thing finished. You know, that's where the equipment is doing so much of this thinking for you. And that way, that retouch point two, retouch point two, retouch point two, we're going to get there, get there, get there. You finally get impatient, you take it down too much and it falls in. We go, forget it, I'm never doing this again. You know, it's improved our experience with it, but it has absolutely changed what these customers can experience. Your patients, even if they're high power, even if it's a tricky job, even if it's one of those things where you're going, you know, it's a pretty strong prescription with a lot of astigmatism. It's like, well, actually, you look at it, it's still within, it's not a big deal. It's still within what I can get as stock. This is, actually, I can have this for you tomorrow afternoon. That is game changer stuff. And I'm sure we all have stories, but, you know, that patient that comes in that is the minus 850 with an infection, or is, you know, high minus kid that, you know, the glasses are gone, they're inconsolable, nobody knows what happened to them, and being able to take care of them right then is back in our core competency of service, and what helps us, you know, restoring sight's really fun. We have an awesome job, but we also have bills to pay. And so we have to optimize those profits as we're looking at it. So let's talk money. Money's not evil. This is one of the things that we've got to look at, and we've got to make sure when we're talking about return on investment that we're making good decisions. And so we're going to get into a little math here. What my recommendation for you, though, is, you know, get your lab bill, talk to your rep, have them look at this for you, like in a very granular way, getting down to the micro, because that way you'll know exactly what this math is going to be. There's no surprises, there's no shell games, there's anything funny. But if we're just going to kind of throw this out there, and imagine doing VSP and office revenue per month, if you just did 50 of those, you know, so we're talking, you know, 1 to 2 a day, you're going to put in about $33 per going in on that. So now, on top of that, just increase private pay, that type thing. So we're going to have about a 30% reduction in our lab bill. In this case, we're talking, you know, mid-size office, couple $1,000 lab bill, 50 patients having everything else. So that comes in. So those two, 1650 and 600, there's lab savings plus the profit. And we'll go back to the next one, and I'll try to hold all this here for you. There we go. So that means that if we're looking at a base, an motion edger, which is a good piece of equipment. I'm not saying that it's, let's call it economy. That is a nicer way to put it. So on a 60-month program, you're talking about something that's going to cost $500 or $600 a month, which means from that $2,250 after we pay it, we're putting $1,665 a month net back in. So that means it's a margin increase of almost $20,000. So that lab savings, by the time we took it and pay it back off, about an 18-month payoff. Now, by the time you do taxes, Section 179, that 6.5, 7-month repay, that is ROI. That is us being able to look at something and acquire it and have it be pretty rapid to break even. Now, in our lab, we chose to go to a different level. That's why we chose Couture, because it can do more than just that entry level. And I'm going to stop and use my exact thing I said we weren't going to do and use the medical model of ROI against this, okay? Because this is part of where my decision to go with flagship technology instead of base technology came into play. Because if you look at the sticker price and go, I'm going to save money, that'll preserve my profit. Well, hang on, because it's not always how the math works. Think about what you've spent on glaucoma testing equipment. Think about what you've spent on dry eye testing equipment. Now, those are huge spends. That's different than margins, but let's use dry eye because it's a little bit more in this space. Glaucoma, that's preventing vision loss. So you're right, we'll spend some things there just to take better care of patients. But for dry eye, we've got lots of us are spending quite a bit of money on IPL and RF or LipiFlows or lid treatment devices. And if you look at the average conversion on those, talking about a 3 to 5% conversion versus offer rate. So you got 1 in 20 patients that you're talking to actually getting it. So we're spending a large amount of money for a very small amount of cash conversion while we're going in there. So that's a pretty big gap, but yet nowadays we jump in all the time on dry eye treatment. It's where we're all headed. Well, in-office finishing can take what's already a 50, 60% capture rate and increase that capture rate to more like 60, 70%, which is amazing because now you're going, don't walk out the door, I got you right now. So that is a very easy ROI to calculate. That's one of our key KPIs that we're watching in our practices that we're living off of lifeblood. Now, if you add to that what you can do in being able to do second pairs and able to do sun, the profit impacts are huge and differentiate you. So you've got marketing. It's our core competency. You've already got the patients here. So it is interesting that for some reason this math is harder for us to do, but let's look at it. All right, so let's do the same thing about the same number of jobs on our VSP, and the same thing would happen for other insurances if you're doing in-office finishing options for them. And I know, look, there's a lot of different things happening depending on what state you're in. There's a lot of movement back and forth. There's lawsuits, there's people fussing, but I think it's still a place where we're seeing this pendulum swing back to us having more control here. And now one thing where I'm going to throw it in, but I'm going to zero it back out. So the ability of Couture to do chemistry clips is pretty amazing. So if you did that, that's going to be pretty easy, $75, $80 each. If you take that into something different, like a headache treatment, like Aviolux or something like that, considerably more than that. But we'll zero those out. Let's just throw that out and just imagine, a little bit bigger practices. Lab bill, going to keep it at about that 30%. So we're talking about a $2,100 savings here. You are going to be able to do more sport frames, more sun. You can do your own drill. That's going to save you a little bit. Even just at 1 to 2 of those a week, that's still going to be about another $240. So our lab savings is about $2,100 and our gross profit at about $4,000 there. Now, premium lab package, this is everything all in one. If that's $59,000 and it's 60 months, you're going to be about $1,000 a month. So by the time you factor all that back in, that annual margin is $35,000, annual lab saving of $25,000. So payback before tax, so sub 2 years. So when equipment after 179 with tax deduction on it, especially if you're able to do some other things there, 7 months. I have bought a lot of equipment over the years, particularly when it comes to things like dry eye treatment. And let me tell you, I don't have much that breaks even in 7 months. So what does all of that mean? And so what it really comes down to is why we talked about Rule 2 being easier. Like the equipment thinks for us. So the ability to use wavefront technology to center the lens, to trace, and we'll show you a little bit more about it in just a second, 3D visualization, actually able to see where this bevel is going to be before you've even made it, torque management systems that can handle our coatings that we use now. But more importantly, when it comes to that back of the office, being able to adopt this, put it into your workflow and operate easily, that is a major shift from where we were 20 years ago 25 years ago for me when I was trying to learn how to work a piece of equipment. Now it's one of these things where it's pretty easy to operate. It doesn't put us an Achilles heel where we have someone that we're afraid to lose. And a big part of what helped me choose Couture was this TrueFit bevel. All right, so TrueFit's the name of the system, and it's the only thing on the market that can measure the bevel width, its height, and its position on the frame. So the bevel's literally different every single time. And that 3D trace, again, I'll show it to you in just a moment, for the frame curve, the bevel path, depth, the width, and its position. So it's getting all the way out, even if it's really steep. So without you having to do crazy stuff with the frame that ends us having bad cutouts and things like that. TrueFit is absolutely amazing and can make, and I'm not hurting feelings here, but it can make a mediocre optician a great one. So when we talk about an ideal centered lens, the wavefront technology here, my most precise lensometer in my office is actually in my edging system, which is pretty amazing. So especially when it comes to laying out, precision on axis and optical centers, or making sure the progressives are laid out, it's there. And I think that's also a thing that you tend to hear. So people are like, well, maybe single vision, I'm afraid to cut progressives. Why? So with the equipment we have now, expensive lens fails are not, mistakes are going to happen, but that's just not really something that happens very often. The equipment is just vastly superior to what we've had in the past. And you don't want to use the term idiot proof because that implies the people that work for you are idiots, but its ability to trace, its ability to lay out, its ability to catch things and go, that's not how you want to put that in there. Even just those simple things are good. So tracing, when it comes to how much more robust this system is compared to what we've had in the past, the 3D model it generates is absolutely astonishing, but also it's robust in that this is all metal parts around that, not the cheap little plasticky stuff that bends and flexes or snaps off or causes trouble. Found it very resistant to repair. It does well. It's been kind of a rock star when it comes to its ability to just be there working and running long hours. My edger works harder than I do. So, but and keeping that frame intact, so not altering the frame there. So once we start tilting the frame or trying to do crazy things to get it, quote unquote, to trace, that's where we get in trouble. And then you end up with bad visual outcomes and issues there. That's something where the equipment just does an absolutely astonishingly good job about that. Base curve is amazing, and it is one of those times where, since it's 3D tracing, again, it's watching this. It's not the be all end all where AI is scaring us and all these other things. It's one of these things where it's so intuitive that you don't really realize all of the things the equipment is doing. And that's that 3D. That comes back to that TrueFit and making sure that's embellished. So this is what they're seeing. So in that TrueFit technology, it lays it out and it's showing before we've even cut this lens, hey, here's where we're going to be. And you can take this and manipulate it in 3D. So that way it takes that optician and allows them to be much, much more. It's like a force multiplier for them on what they're able to do. But another thing when it comes to Couture was the ability to handle these hydrophobic lenses. Look, slippage is a major deal. It got to be really hard for us years ago. These outer coatings are very, very slick. And it's hard to get the leap pads to hold on to them. So the lens could slip around, or we had to really squeeze hard. The sensors that are being used here are vastly superior to what we did, which means that the cycle time is optimized. It does great with hydrophobic lenses without them spinning, slipping, or breaking, but it also cuts really quickly, because the other way we had it is it could do it, but it would just take forever. Well, then at that point, we're not getting the efficiency, and that's the whole point of trying to maintain profitability. So I've got a little video here, and this is a little bit more just, kind of a show and tell, but it's showing it in 3D helps you really appreciate what the system looks like. So again, plugs into the wall, sits on the counter in the back of your office. So you can see what's happening here. And again, the lensometer is incredibly precise. So that means that since it's able to really measure and lay out and block, that trace information, and that, there you go, the optician able to move it back and forth and go, okay, I know exactly what this is going to look like on the edge. That TrueFit bevel, you can actually trace around the edge of it and know exactly what that bevel is going to look like at every spot. Now, in the hands of a novice operator, it's powerful. in the hands of an expert operator, it is amazing. My optician is, our master optician is fantastic, and she can get this thing to do some amazing stuff with shelf bevels and nerdy things like that. But from a centering standpoint, if she's not there and it's a Saturday and we lay out, we're still able to work just as fast as we would otherwise. Even if that is an AR coated lens, it's not one of those things where my other staff is afraid to touch it. Like, oh, I'm going to wait until she's back to be able to do this. The way that it works for alignment and the speed that it works at is highly efficient. Now, when she's in and we are running full speed and wide open, what is impressive is the turnaround time on the equipment. So it's able to keep her cutting fast. That way I'm not paying an optician to sit around and stare at a piece of equipment. So dual visualization is a unique ability. One of the things that's coolest here is at the moment being able to just use that as you're laying out the lens and looking at it. So that actually can be shown to the patient. That comes back to our Chip and Joanna moment of being able to go, how can we use this in other ways? What novel ideas do we have to be able to show a patient the difference? Like, hey, look, let me scan this. I'm going to show you. This is what this looks like in plastic. Click. This is what this looks like in 174. For real, exactly what it looks like. Which one do you want? And it makes it much easier to handle those. Most importantly, though, that faster workflow, that speed, that gets our key people out where they need to be. And on the calculation of that, you're talking about an hour a day. So in that hour, what are they able to do? Talk about something hard to grasp inside of ROI. What if you had one more hour of optician time? Is that one more sunglass? Is that one more second pair? Is it just better customer service? Is it just one more patient that was impressed so much that they told someone else? So these wins are like geometric growth wins, right? So it is one of those things, and getting back into it, yeah, it's getting back to our roots, and it's an oldie but a goodie, but it's also putting us back at our core competency and what we're really good at. Lets us take time with our customers and our patients. So this is looking at, I'm going to kind of use the pointer here, looking at the entire product line, kind of going across all the different options. And in our entry level options, they're there, but you're talking about mechanical tracing. And when I kind of want to get back up into this high volume, because the more I can do, the more I can save. I don't want it to be where I'm not able to do this wrap or do that. Now it has to be sent. So once we wanted high speed and we wanted that wavefront lensometry, and since we use a lot of anti-glares in there, that really pushed us very easily in understanding that Couture was going to be where we wanted to go. TrueFit is absolutely amazing. What it looks like, what it sees, you really have to see it, touch it if you get a chance, especially at a meeting or something like that. If you get a chance to do it, it is amazing. So showing that to patients, I think, also has a whole other level of potential. All right, so this guy wrote an article. No one cares about him, but it is one of those moments when we wrote this little piece. What was interesting was the little sidebar. And when I wrote the little sidebar, these little bits are one of those things that you write, and as you write it, you find that you're having more fun writing the sidebar than writing the article because it gets passion, and then we have to find a way to fit it in there. But one of my mantras is that if you don't tell them, they won't know, right? And this comes back to a clinic that has always had in-office finishing. And then our patients go, wait, you can do that? It's like, yes. In about an hour? It's like, I can't believe you said a slogan from the 90s, but yeah, we can. And so having that ability to make a pair of glasses while the patient waits is amazing. But having the ability to make a second pair while the patient waits is a really interesting moment to reshape how they view their insurance plan materials, as well as how they look at online ordering. So if this turns into I just want to take my RX and I'm going to go to the place my insurance told me to go to and order a second pair online, that's the fastest way for us to lose out. We didn't spend anything, we just didn't make anything, and the future becomes very bleak. But it is completely different when we can elevate the importance and get them to understand our ability in in-office finishing and the ability to make same-day glasses. Really, I'm telling you, they're not impressed by your OCT as much as they are when they find out we can do something for them right now. And so I put this quote because it's something I put in that little article, and I say this to my staff all the time, and they're tired of hearing it, but it drives me crazy when I hear a patient say, I want to take my RX someplace where I can get it while I wait. You're there. You're already there. We can do this right now. And even if I can't do it today, I can have what you need here, and I'm going to have that turned around faster. So then we had to have an intentional growth moment in making sure that we're letting our patients know what we can do. down to even knowing the power ranges, knowing what we have in stock, knowing what I can have tomorrow, knowing what's going to take 2 business days, compared to the normal conversation about their insurance job being back in 5 to 7 working days, unless there's a holiday. But with next week being, there's the holiday coming then, and they're closing early on Friday, so it'll probably be 2 to 3 weeks. Boy, there's a customer service win. See you in 3 weeks, I hope. Instead, messaging this on our website, on our Google listings, on social media, on marketing, just telling them completely changed their perception of what we were doing. And that differentiation point is absolutely massive. What I think is the most amazing is when the patient gets their second pair of glasses, right? The one that their insurance didn't do, or the one that before they get their first. And they're going, well, wait, you did that before they did. Yep, we're pretty good at this. So I think in review, let's kind of look back here just a little bit. We can reduce our costs, we can increase our profits. It's not all about money, but we have to be here, and this is a place where we can win. We spend all of our time and effort trying to have more people like us and follow us and spend all this money advertising and optimizing. You can do it right there with the patients you have. We can make it faster. We can save staff time. We can stop that patient that is waiting for 3 weeks from calling us 30 times, elevate our patient care and make ourselves stand out. But most importantly, this does not have to be an intimidating process. It is something that every single one of us can do. Grab a copy of your lab bill, talk to your rep, and start looking at what you can do to change the way that your practice works. So, all right, questions. What do we have?
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Let me pull them on up here. And if you have a question, remember, you can always just type them right in that question box. Okay, so question number 1. Here we go. If not already answered, do you recommend not signing on to finishing through vision plans so you can make more profits per job? What about charging more for quicker turnaround, even if you're finishing through a vision plan?
Ooh, this gets tricky. Wow. Thanks for leading off with the easy one. Holy
Sorry about that.
No, actually, okay, you're absolutely right. Whoever asked that question, you already see the light, right? So that's where we are. We're looking at this and going, I keep working harder and harder and harder and harder for less and less and less and less. So yeah, we got to figure a few things out. Now, I have to tread lightly. Again, we have, with litigation going on, with laws that are being put forward, there's a lot of different things. It depends on your state, it depends on your country, it depends on where you are and what you're dealing with. So it's a little bit like tax advice. My answer is always going to be consult your CPA, because I don't want you to go to jail and be mad at me. But when it does come to these things with vision plans, it is time to take back control. And I do think that is a place where we do what's best for patients and we do it in the right ways. But yeah, it means kind of some novel packaging, right? So in our case, like, we have what was a sales saver for us, one of those, like, if the patient was cash pay, there's no reason that the vision care plan patient can't have that sales saver package. $95 exam lens frame, or I'm sorry, lens and frame package done on this stuff. Cool. When's it going to be done? Well, for your minus 250, probably be about 15 minutes. Right? And that's that second pair concept of the second pair sale being there. Now, if in-office finishing is allowed, like so VSP, IMED, those type of situations, yeah, it's a way you could do it. Now, as far as charging, that gets into a rush turnaround. There's certain, depending on which it is, sometimes rush turnaround's not allowed as a line item. So that would get into the gray area, but I admire your ideas.
Great. Question here, what's Avalux / the headache treatment that you briefly mentioned?
Avalux is actually a lens type, really interesting stuff. It is a filter developed by a neurologist. Where I think it fits into this system is headache lenses are neat, but they only come from certain labs. There's certain ways to do it. However, a chemistry clip makes total sense to me. Now, in this case, we haven't fully implemented in this. I haven't done a lot of these, but headache patients, I tell you what, talk about somebody you don't have to market to, they will find you. And the ability of my Couture to handle a chemistry clip completely changes this, because now, rather than having it where they have an entire separate pair that has the filter that they need in it, and that could be any other filter too, right? Polar, or if you had somebody that wanted the FL41 or whatever you want to use in those, that allows you to put that into the chemistry clip. And that way, their symptoms begin or their light sensitivity begins, they could put the clip on, but they wouldn't necessarily have to use it all the time. But I think that, again, a major differentiation point, the ability to do that in-house, game changer.
Right. How long would it actually take if you just wanted to make them with chemistry clips, like for a typical job, like let's just say, for your average patient, where the specs that you're making the clips for aren't too complicated? How long would it take?
So if it's Plano and you have it in hand, it was amazing. We were at Vision Expo East in New York, and they were making chemistry clips in the booth, in the Visionics booth while we waited. So it is now that is not as easy as just having like, the day one operator handle that. It's in the capabilities, kind of getting into the advanced capabilities of the system in a good way. But no, it's not that big a deal. You could stand there and watch it be done. So it is something where now this is a moment of, on anything like this, under promise and over deliver, which is why the old glasses in about an hour happened, because do not tell the patient this will be done in 10 minutes and walk back to your optician and see them stacked to the ceiling and go, hey, this patient's waiting. They want these in 10 minutes. That is a good way to get your tires slashed by your employees.
Right. Question here: if you were starting cold, would you still recommend the Couture?
It's going to depend on volume. Cold start is interesting. So, but also it's going to depend on where you are. So I was actually talking with an OD last week at a meeting that we're at, and he is very specialized, does a lower volume, very high revenue per patient clientele. I would say Couture fits perfectly with that clientele, because it's the kind of patient where you can show them, I mean, for that matter, like I said, this idea of walking them back to the lab and like, here's where the magic happens. This is where we do this. And so let's trace your frame real quick. Now let me show you. Here's your lens, Mr. -6, in plastic. And they go, oh yeah, I don't want that. I remember that's bad. And it's like, okay, well then click, here it is in poly. Here it is in 174. And being able to see that's a completely different experience. Now, can you do that with other systems? No. So I think it is interesting there. Again, though, starting cold is its own thing. You do have to kind of decide what you're doing, but it would depend on your base. If the base is a lot of Medicaid, then I would be very cautious. But if it's one of those type sets, it's a completely different thing. Now, if you're going to start out and it is one of those home run spots where you're going to be busy right at the beginning, I don't see any problem with it if the volume can handle it.
Right. Question here: how do you dispose of the material created by the finishing process? And question, I guess, follow up: is it recyclable? And do you need to add a hood or a vent for the tinting unit?
Okay, great. Really good questions on that. Okay, so making sure when we're using, so most of our dyes, tint unit, that type of stuff, most of that is now you're able to pour it down the drain. It's not big, scary stuff. Make sure you're purchasing from a reputable distributor, using good stuff that you know what you're using there. As far as the scurf, the what's coming off of lenses as it's going in, the systems are actually very low water utilization, but most everything is just straight down normal drainage system. So it's going to run through a filter, kind of like a paint filter that's going to capture the large mass. That just goes in the garbage. So because it's going to be mixed material, so you wouldn't really recycle that. That's a tricky thing to recycle. Not really because it's one thing or another thing, it's just because it's different things. Then from there, the water utilization, it's being pumped back out and emptied. So it is not heavy water utilization. In fact, that's actually something we were discussing. It's considerably less than what it used to be. And research systems are, of course, even less than that. But yeah, as far as cleanup and maintenance, it handles most everything on its own in kind of a cool way. You do need drain, you do need water, and you do need power.
Right. Question here, a little bit more detailed, a little in the weeds here. So can the system drill for chemistry clips in an existing pair of glasses? And the comparison charts showed milling for the Couture. So is it using grinding wheels, milling, or both?
So using grinding wheels, so diamond wheels are going now. It actually, when it's coming in and doing like safety bevels and drilling, so it's like the video doesn't do it justice. It's part of why you do need to kind of, if you're at a show, go see it. So it's sort of like a Swiss Army knife is hidden up in there. Okay, so as it's deploying these alarms, you can see the feelers were in the video, and that's where it's kind of tracing around the edge. But then it's like R2D2. Okay, the tiny edge bevel wheel comes out for the safety. The tiny drill comes out. It's got a wine cork opener. It can open your beer for you, but no, so most of that is internal to it. Now, as far as in an existing, this gets a little in the weeds to specifics. I don't want to misspeak. So it's going to depend a lot on what it was, is, and what you're trying to do. So, but as far as general capabilities, yes.
Right. Interesting question here. So back in the day, they used to talk about how bad some of the systems would smell when they were in operation. Um,
That's
what's it
true.
like these days?
So yes, there is. So one of the things that is so there's an old joke. We had a guy who was when I say old salt optician, he he had forgotten more about optics than most of us will ever know. And every now and then, when you would run a transition high index, you can actually smell it. Yeah, it is one of those things. And he would joke around. He'd be like, "Yep, smells like money." Because when you are doing a transition high index in your office, that is not where you saved 30 or $40. You just saved a tremendous amount by doing that in-house. So yes, occasionally. That said, compared to the old days, I still remember one of the first edgers we worked with, it had a sound cover that you were supposed to flip down every single time you used it. Well, that kept it from sounding like someone was running a skill saw in the back of the office. It also kept all the plastic from going everywhere. Well, no one did that because it took way too long to put this thing up and down every single time you moved it. So they propped them all up. And I think that's where a lot of the equipment got a bad rap for being noisy and dirty and loud. And part of why the lab turned into this noisy, dirty, loud thing in the back, mostly because the weird guy with the ponytail that wanted to go to optometry school had his music turned up really loud and wanted the door to stay closed. Now this can be, I think this can be a showplace in our offices and a place to win in a very strong way with patients.
Right. Interesting question here. So, question about reliability. So, what has your experience been with the reliability of the system? And if it does go down, what actually happens? Who can actually fix it?
So far, it has been a tank. It is pretty impressive. We cut pretty high volume and have not had any significant issues. When we did have like little things like at the very beginning, we had a tip, we broke a tip off on one of the things. We didn't know how to put it back on yet. So support has been fantastic. So that's one other thing that when you're buying, that's one of the things that you're buying is a company that stands behind it. So Visionex, Briot has been at this a long time. And that is one thing that has gotten so good with the ability to go take a picture of it and text it to me. And you do that and send it to them and they go, "Oh, the little thing on the right?" Like, yes, like push it. You push it and it clips back in. You go, "Oh, thanks." So that's no longer these big elaborate, processes waiting in line for someone to come to you 3 weeks from next Tuesday and you're down. So the amount of downtime is pretty low. The robustness and the ability to repair is pretty high. I've been very pleased with that. And I think, that's one thing, things will happen. So like on a lens, every now and then, I hate to tell you guys this, especially if something's being recorded, but every now and then I screw up an RX. Um, my students do. It must not be me. It has to be them. So we'll have something and we can fix that so fast when we have the ability. It's like, what happens? Like, sorry about that. When I wrote that, it was too messy and that's my fault. So, or when I clicked that, I clicked, you ended up at axis 13 instead of 31, however it is that it happened. Well, now I can fix that issue fast. So or it can be something simple, just something got scratched. I had one patient, he went out to his truck. We had literally just dispensed his glasses. He put his foot on the clutch. The truck slid back. He looked down right as he went to shut the door. The glasses fell off. The truck rolled over him. So 45 seconds after dispensing this pair of glasses, he comes back in with it's just gone. And it's like he was walking out with his fresh hot pizza, tripped and fell in the parking lot kind of thing. And we said, you know what, we got this. What's amazing is like, yep, I've got another one of those frames. I have your lenses. We'll have this ready. Give us, 20, 30 minutes and we'll have this done. What a win, right? So things are going to happen, but it lets me fix things fast and maintain that in my control rather than going, let me call the lab and see what they're going to do for you. And so I can own that, which means that I can control the quality.
Right. And an interesting question here. So, would you actually recommend positioning the edger so that customers can actually see it being used?
I love this, but bear in mind that you do have your staff operating it. So I have seen this where there was a glass wall put up and you could actually see the optician making everything. That's a double-edged sword. So if they're having a bad day, you might see that. Or if they're having I don't know if your office has any sort of disagreements in it ever, but mine has had a time or two where people disagree about something. I wouldn't necessarily want that to be an on-stage discussion. I do like the idea of being able to bring patients backstage.
Right. And question here, how long until the wheels need to be replaced?
Ooh, that's a really good question. As far as durability, I'd have to defer that to one of the more technical people. We have not had to replace or redo anything with ours running so far, but even the older equipment, Brio equipment is kind of built to run, so it's not like that was very frequent. But yeah, you'll occasionally have to, wear and tear. It's going to eventually get there. They probably have a number that they could tell you better than I could. I don't want to guess wrong.
Right. And if anybody with Brio wants to let me know, I'm happy to put it in here, or I'll actually put it in the archive. And another question, can it do glass?
Ooh, now glass enters into an entire other mess. So once we're doing glass, now there are, speaking of wheels, there's some interchangeability there as far as what you're doing and what you're doing, especially depending on which piece of equipment you have. So for instance, let's say that you're running tons and tons and tons of poly, or that you like to use a lot more high index. That can be kind of optimized in the same way that the device makes its decision on water flow. And that would be far more applicable to entry level and wheels and entry level edgers compared to what would be with Couture. But glass is its own nightmare, especially considering testing requirements depending on your country of origin. It can become a complete nightmare.
Interesting question here, and I think it's probably difficult for you to answer it since you've been, using systems like this for a long time. What percentage of people would you say walk from your office right now and go elsewhere to get their glasses? I guess the question is, what's your capture rate because you actually have a device like this in-house?
Oh, sure, yeah. So as it refers to capture rate, first of all, what's the walk rate in my office? So our capture rate, we run about 65%, which I would say is better than average if we look at KPI metrics for the Southeastern United States. So we're always efforting that, trying to get that better and further up. But yeah, we have a certain percent of patients, and the way we calculate our capture rate, that's just divided by the number of manifest refractions. So some of those patients chose not to change or didn't have enough change that they got anything. Some of those patients chose to go elsewhere. Some of those patients went online. I'm fighting the exact same fight every day that you are. Now, what would it be if I didn't have this? That's an excellent question, and one I don't care to calculate. I think I'll keep going at it and not test it for a quarter and see how much money I can lose.
Right. And someone makes an interesting observation that no one around him in his particular town actually edges in-house at this point. So I guess the question is, have you noticed in your town, are you sort of the only one, or are other people doing this now? And have you really taken advantage of that from a marketing perspective?
So we're in rural North Mississippi, and we tend to forget that our own capabilities, and that's part of why you got to tell them, right? They won't know if you don't tell them. And I think that it is a huge win. Is it as cool as saying, hey, I bought this brand new IPL device for eyelids? Like, I don't know. I don't know why, for some reason, we're not excited about in-office finishing when it is, in a lot of ways, the answer to all the things we keep complaining about.
Yep.
I'd say that's an awesome opportunity for one thing.
Yep. And I think, we're actually out of time here. We've the hour has flown by, but an archive of this webinar is going to be posted up on ODwire within the next couple of days. So if anybody else has more questions, definitely ask them there in the discussion thread that'll run right beneath the archive. But we have learned an awful lot tonight. So Chris, thank you for coming out and doing this. It's been way too long since we've had a webinar on a topic like this. So thank you for doing it.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, and thank you everyone for showing up, and I guess I will catch up with everyone online. So have a good night, everyone.